Thank you for that great introduction. Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay. Uh, there are three great thought leaders on the stage with me. I am awed by their qualifications and accomplishments. Our topic is very broad and very deep. The inner line, mapping identity, intention, and impact. I come from Silicon Valley where we move fast, break things. And here are three people who focus on building, advising corporations how to be lasting corporations. So we have a bit of disconnect in how we operate. We are both product of our experiences as well as victims of our experiences, I would say. So, with that, I would say, as an entrepreneur, I would ask the question like software we build is supposed to be scalable, can the soul be scalable? So, that is sort of exploratory question we will try to answer in this presentation. But I'm going to first turn to Jaideep Prabhu and ask a question that how does he view the topic, which is deep and broad? How does he view what strings ring in his heart when we think of this very deep topic?
Thank you so much, Vinita. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today. I find this topic fascinating. As a marketing professor and somebody who studies innovation, we often talk about the importance of something called product market fit in order to have impact. As an entrepreneur, you'll be familiar with that. So, they always say that your product will be successful if it offers something that people want and need. But I think that story misses out the people involved in that process and their identity. I think that matters. And in my own research, I find that often entrepreneurs and innovators start with who they are, what they are good at, what they are passionate about. From that sense of their identity, they then move to an intention. What do they want to do in the world? What kind of change do they want to make? What kind of problem do they want to solve for whom? And then from that intention comes something that has impact. Let me give an example and a story. So, one of the most remarkable things I think that has happened in India over the last 10 or 15 years is what is being called digital public infrastructure, India Stack. It goes by many names. But it all started with this idea of giving every Indian literally a unique ID. Speaking of identity, Aadhaar. Now, the people who are behind that idea, people like Nandan Nilekani, various bureaucrats, technocrats, politicians, etc., they started with this idea of giving every Indian something we take for granted, but many of us didn't have at that time, an identity, a way to prove who we were. So that is the sense of identity. But also to something that brings us all together, that everybody would have as a sort of starting point in the country. From that comes this intention of inclusion, bringing people who are outside the formal economy into the formal economy, particularly those who are most marginalized and so on. And then only from that intention, over a period of time, through a lot of work, through a lot of ingenuity, through a lot of frugal innovation, do we get impact. But several years later now, we have 1.4 billion people very uniquely around the world who all have a way of proving who they are, have a unique identity, and that has brought them many other benefits, including being in the banking system and so on. So that's how I interpret this very interesting topic.
Well, that is very interesting the way you addressed all four as three eyes in our topic. Uh, how does how does being having the experience of two continents, you have good footprint in both professionally, you live in UK, Cambridge, and you also come to India. And how has that played a role, if anything, differently?
Oh, again, that's a wonderful question, and I'm sure everybody has a similar experience. Grew up in India, I studied here, then I went to the US, I studied there, then I went to the Netherlands, then I went to the UK. So all those experiences as well have, whether I've thought about it or not, involved identity. And I think I've had to do what I call include and transcend. So I start off as Indian and I remain Indian, but then I became American, then I became European, then I became British in a way while remaining Indian. So I think there's something about
Wonderful,
identity.
wonderful. Arun, would you like to reflect on
Thank
your?
you so much, Vinita. The questions that you ask, and you ask them so well, and she's been asking them before we met here. We never knew each other. At least we didn't. I didn't know the three of you. I don't think you also knew each other. But the questions you asked us to think about then already made at least me think a lot about who I am, how I discovered who I am through my life. What are the moments when I felt conscious of my identity? And today, just now, you asked at the beginning, can the soul be scalable? And I said, oh gosh, can an identity be scalable? My identity is the uniqueness in me. Oh, it can't be scalable. My identity is who I think I am and how I think I'm better than you or different to you, and how I think you think of me better than you or different to you. And my search for my identity is through being an Indian. Growing up in India, I was 4 when our country became independent, tough years. And we had been made to believe by the British that we were not good enough to do things ourselves. They had to organize us. They had to build things in England and sell to us because we couldn't do it ourselves. So that's the environment I grew up in. And by the way, yes, I also went to the United States and I lived there for 10 years. And what do you think I was consulting there about? It was about innovation, innovation with a purpose, my 10 years there. I also became an American citizen at the end of it. They granted me the citizenship. But I chose to come back to India and give it all up and become an Indian citizen again. Because I realize that I care for my identification with this land, these people here, my people. That's who I am. And so I can tell you many stories about how this passion to make things happen in my country, which would be good for my country, have led me to be part of great innovations here in India and some outside too, for the sake of India. So I feel that the purpose of your innovation is what makes a big difference. There are two types of innovation, Silicon Valley type innovators. They get into innovation to make more money for themselves. And we admire them for the greatest innovator. The greatest innovator is the one who made the billions fastest and exited. He dumps this enterprise that he's made and looking for the next one. And quite often those enterprises are wrecks. They're ruined many other investors and the lives of many people, or not improved the lives of hardly anybody. Whereas if it's a purpose and innovation about yourself, the innovations that you engage with, you want to see that they are giving benefits to others and will continue to produce innovators around you. You're not in competition with them. Your role is to stimulate in everybody the passion, I can also do it as well as you.
So, Arun, I have digressing from the topic. I heard you yesterday and today just now talking about we were enslaved by the Britishers. Isn't it about time that we forget about it and move on with our life?
You know, I forgotten about it. May I say so? I forgot about it, as I told you, within 3, 4 years. My passion was because I was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. He touched my forehead, by the way, a few days before he died. I was taken as a child to a prayer meeting in Delhi. And you know, he used to, those days after partition, and my family were refugees from partition. So we were put up by some family in Delhi, and my mother took me to Gandhiji's prayer meeting. And a few days later, he was assassinated at the same site. And he did touch my head, and my mother would keep saying to me that, please remember that that great innovator, that great leader has touched your life. And you say, Gandhi, an innovator? Well, what is innovation, you see? And that's we come to my mind that an innovator is a person who passionately wants to produce a result for which he does not have the resources. Yes? And that's the concept, therefore, your concept, which I read you. Excellent. Frugal innovation. That I have very little, but I'm going to put it together in a way that it will overcome the handicap that people think I have and startle them. So Mahatma Gandhi taught us and taught the world the method of non-violent resistance, non-cooperation, non-violently. And the British couldn't face up to that innovation. They didn't know how to handle it. And Mahatma Gandhi's innovation of the method by which poor, powerless people can overcome a big power in the United States. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. In South Africa, everywhere. Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia against the Soviets. So he was a great innovator of a method
Yeah.
by which you can combine the little resources frugally available to you and achieve the result that you want.
Thank you. All right, next, bringing everybody back to the topic of inner lining, I'd like Ranjay Gulati to reflect his thoughts, what it means to him.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So I thought I'd just reflect on the topic with a story that begins here in Jaipur. So for me, it's very interesting coming here to talk about this in Jaipur, of all places. So growing up as a kid, my mother was a teacher at the American school and was sent to Vanderbilt University for a master's in anthropology. This is the late 60s, and her master's thesis was about tribal women in Sanganer here, who would hand print their own fabric. There was no commercial, nothing going on back then, no garment export. And she taught at the American school, where she felt that the Americans looked down on the Indians, and she was very proud of being Indian. So she had this idea, so she started to take these fabrics and put them on her clothes, skirts, blouses, Western clothes. And then she had this crazy idea that she was going to take this idea to scale. So 1972, she went to Paris with 2 suitcases and went door to door and convinced 3 fashion houses to buy her designs. And this thing took off. And what I found interesting was her goal was never to start a business. It was always about trying to show the Western world that India may be poor, but it has very advanced, sophisticated aesthetic, that the craft of India is beautiful. So it was always about that. So that's one story I thought I'd tell you, and it led me to write a book called Deep Purpose, that, purpose is something that not only individuals carry, but organizations also have intent. I'll fast forward to a second piece of the story, which also ties to my own thinking about intent and impact. So my mother builds this business. It's a lot of gender bias in those days. 1972, a woman entrepreneur in India was unheard of. So anyway, she's successful. She, buys a piece of land in what is now Gurgaon, where she was going to build a farmhouse and a studio. And a developer decides he wants the land. And it connects to identity in a second. I'll tell you how. So one day I'm home from boarding school, and a gentleman, the guard from the gate, comes and says, somebody's at the door insisting on seeing your mom. Can you talk to him? So I'm 14 years old. I went and meet this guy. He's from the developer saying, I want to meet your mom. I said, no, she won't meet you. She doesn't want to sell the land. He said, tell her 5 minutes, only 5 minutes. So I went to my mom. She said, okay, bring him in. You stand at the door. In 5 minutes, you take him out. So I'm standing at the door. He comes in, sits down very respectfully. He takes out a blank signed check and a piece of paper and says, ma'am, we don't want to negotiate. Whatever you want, please write on the check, and we were taking your land. So my mother turns to him and said, listen, I don't want to sell, no matter what the price. I don't care about the money. At this point, he gets belligerent right away. He says, I am not leaving here till you sign this paper. My mother said, excuse me, please leave now. He at this point leans back and he pulls back his blazer and he has a gun tucked in his waist. Now I'm at the door. I'm frozen. I'm immobilized. I'm confused. I don't know what to do because I am thinking, should I jump him? Should I call the guard? Maybe he's bluffing. I'll wait and see. My mother, 5'1" tall, I think something snapped. And it ties to identity. I'll tell you in a second. She's 5'1" tall. She leaps out of her chair in the sofa, walks around the table, and slaps him across the face. He didn't even see it coming. And she said, how dare you come into my house? First you try to bully me, and now you threaten me. And it was a great strategic move because the guard heard the commotion. He came running in. This guy was completely disoriented, ran out of there, forgetting his checkbook. Now, I asked her afterward, I said, you're crazy. Didn't you see he had a gun? She said, absolutely, I saw the gun. And she made two observations to me that I stuck in my head. One is she said, absolutely, I was scared. Just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing. Just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing. And her other point was, she says, all my life I have worked hard. I'm a self-made person. How can somebody come into my house and threaten me to take away my own piece of land from me? You should never let anybody do that. So I learned about entrepreneurs are very skillful in channeling their identity to innovate and create, but they're also very good at channeling that same identity to act with courage, which is taking action in the face of fear. So for me, it all started here in Jaipur.
So, Ranjay, what you just shared jogged another womanly thing in me, which is we talk about the inner line, which is a philosopher inside us. Is it something we are born with, or it gets awakened by something that happens to you? And it does when difficulties hit you. But biggest thing is you talked about women and how they are, your mother was unusual in that way. Where did she get it from? You may not know the answer. You may not know the answer, but I have observed girls being raised, and all of them, they are being told what to do. They don't have the independence of thinking. So this is the independence of thinking when you remove the scaffoldings, that they have no support system and they are launching themselves out, thinking for themselves. And this is an important aspect of the same topic. How do you develop the philosopher in yourself so that you can think deeper?
So, Arun and I were talking about this earlier this morning, is all of us have an inner narrative. Identity is about how we see ourselves in relationship to the world around us. And all of us develop that over time. Our own sense of identity, and it could be anchored around my profession, it could be anchored around my gender, it could be anchored around what I feel is deeply important to me, a set of beliefs. It could be my principles, it could be freedom for a country, it could be uplifting other people. So I think all of us have our own inner narrative. Some of us are more aware of it than others. And you're absolutely right that there is a gender bias that sometimes, we give people, children, a negative narrative, one of disempowerment. Others get a narrative of, you can do it. I know you can do it. So how do we build ourselves up, I think is the question. I think we all have the chance to really channel our narrative. And I've looked at companies since I study organizations. It's really interesting. Some of the great leaders I have seen, they look at their work as with a sense of responsibility. I was meant to do this. This is what I was here for. I interviewed an airline pilot who landed a plane in the Hudson River, and he said, in that moment, I realized my entire life up to that moment was a preparation for that moment. Or I talked to the Levi Strauss CEO and another one. Both of them, when they took the job, their friends advised them, don't take this job. But they both felt compelled to take the job because they felt they were uniquely positioned to salvage what was a failing organization. How do we channel that inner narrative? I think is the
I think that is very important, that I call it being able to think for yourself. If you're not going to think with somebody else's mind, having the confidence that your mind is the only mind you can make use of is in itself. When I told that myself, that when I was maybe in 20s, that liberated me, that allowed me to do many more things than I would have otherwise done. So anyway, we are going to move this conversation. We talked about identity, intention, impact. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the fourth I, which we all have our heart stuck to, which is innovation. In some form or the other, innovative thinking, and we all have our own views on it. I think innovative thinking is when we can change the trajectory of our course. It may be a small idea, it may be a big idea, but the trajectory changes. So, with that, maybe I can start with Arun this time. He was the CEO of Innovation Associates in the US, and he has advised corporations on how to spur innovation in individuals or as an organization. Would you share your further thinking on that? What do you mean by that?
Yes, you're asking questions that make one realize what one really believes and how one came to believe that. Huh? When you said about thinking about yourself, an innovator thinks about himself. And I said, no, no. Uh, the type of innovator I'm talking about, I hope I would be, he thinks about others and not about himself. And that's the difference between Silicon Valley innovation is what am I going to get out of it? And where did it start? It came when I was a young man, young boy, 13, 14 years old. My mother, I would mention to you, encouraged me to think about the poor people of my country and Gandhiji as the role model. So I would say, coming from my boarding school in the no company at home by myself, and she'd say, "How can you get bored? There are books to read." And the books were the Mahabharata and the Gita and Aldous Huxley and all sorts of philosophy, Bertrand Russell. So I picked up the Gita, and I went to chapter 3, and since then, God's own truth, I just keep coming back to that line: you only have a right to the work and not to the fruits thereof. This is the famous line that Lord Krishna, who said, I won't bring my weapons, and though he had the chakra, which would be so innovative as a weapon, I'm going to make you discover, Arjuna, your purpose in life, and you will find out from yourself the ability to overcome evil and stand up for righteousness. You only have a right to the work to be done, not to the fruits thereof. So it's occurred to me, yes, one's very obvious that the fruits thereof, whether it's wealth or fame, is not why you should do it, which is unfortunately Elon Musk is doing it all for the wealth and the fame. And Silicon Valley generally, it's about your wealth and your fame and the power that you get out of your wealth and your fame. But in Gandhiji's, I'm sorry, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is even that, certainly that you should not get for yourself. When you say, no consciousness of the result, how can that be? If you're an innovator, you want to produce an outcome. You want to see how far I'm getting towards that. But that thing should not be of benefit to you. It should be, again, Gandhiji's phrase, Anantodaya. Think of the weakest person that you can see around you, and your innovation, your great enterprise should produce results for them in large numbers as quickly as possible. Not faster returns for you as quickly as possible, but faster returns for them as quickly as possible. So this has struck me. I since then keep practicing this. When I'm thinking of doing something, I pause and I say, why am I doing this? And then this question comes, well, I want to see the result. From that result, what am I expecting? And if my expectation is there'll be a lot of people who'll hear me and they'll talk about me and become an influencer or something, I will not do it. But I learned that I'm pretty weak and quite often I do it. But I'm conscious of the fact of why I'm doing it.
Wonderful. So, Ranjay, you want to go next?
I just want to piggyback off of Arun, and I'll keep it quick. I'm sorry to give you a culturally American example here, but I think it's very apropos to what Arun just said. So in America, you should know college football is much more popular than any professional sport. And right now, we are in the semi-finals. The final four teams of college football have been playing each other. We've now reached the final this week. So the four coaches of the semi-finals all have something in common. They were all assistant coaches under the same coach 5 years ago.
And what was his name?
His name is Nick Saban. He is the all-time winning coach in college football. He was the coach of the University of Alabama team. So what is interesting about Saban? Because now the question is, how come something about Saban that all these coaches seem to be doing so well? Saban always said, focusing on winning is a loser's game. So as a team, he said, I never want you to focus on winning. I never want you to look at the scoreboard. You're here for every single play to play the play that you can feel I did my very best in the play. Winning is a byproduct of doing what you do intensely well.
So well said.
Now, I'll leave you with the second thought that you said about innovation. To me, it's been just preparing for this since we had this conversation. I went back and I started to look at work, not in business innovation, because that's something I felt very comfortable. I said, let me look outside. One of the most innovative areas is art. And if you look at artists or photographers who are able to discover beauty in things that we all don't seem to notice. They'll see an ordinary thing and suddenly turn it into something beautiful. And the social scientists who study art call it heightened noticing. That they are able to tune their senses to notice things that others don't even notice. So they will see a beautiful flower and say, there's beauty here. And I think entrepreneurs are also masters of heightened noticing. They see opportunities. They'll say, I smelt it. I didn't think about it. I think they have this heightened sensibility of being able to notice things that may be beneficial to others, may be profitable also, but their ability to kind of see what others don't see. So just these two ideas on outcome and noticing.
Beautifully said. So, Jaideep, you have thought about innovation in a larger scale, Indian economy versus Western economy, how to innovate more with less. And I think it would be very interesting for audience to hear what is the nuance of that thinking?
Thank you, Vinita. So, you had started the question with transformative thinking, how you transform your thinking. And I've been through that process myself because my career, I've studied innovation. In the first part of my career, I studied innovation in large Western corporations in high-tech sectors, like pharmaceuticals, where it's done in a particular way. It's very structured. It's quite expensive. You have, big teams, big budgets pushing the technology frontier. And then in about 2008 or so, I began to study innovation in emerging markets like India. And that completely changed the way I thought about innovation because it was done in a very different way. The intention was to reach people who are on very low incomes. There were large numbers there. So it couldn't be expensive. It had to be highly affordable, highly frugal. And in India, we use the word jugaad to sort of describe that process. And I came across so many fascinating innovators in India who had mastered that approach. And to do that, many of them who are, like us, educated in the formal economy, had to go beyond that identity, coming back to identity. They almost had to be able to suppress their identity and, as you were saying, put themselves in the place of people who had a very different identity. And I'll tell a story of one of the innovators we wrote about who has deeply influenced my thinking since, Harish Hande, who had started a company called Selco, Solar Electric Lighting Company, and you have met him. And he told us that, he Grew up in India, he went to IIT, he went to the US, he did his PhD there in environmental engineering, and he had observed at that time in Central America a lot of people using solar technologies for lighting in rural areas. So he came back to India very much wanting to set up a solar lighting company for people who didn't have access to the electricity grid, people in urban slums, in the countryside, etc. And he approached it from his sense of identity as a technologist, as somebody who has access to the banking system and so on. And he said that the best lesson in life he learned was from a fruit cart vendor, a potential customer of his, who told him when he explained his solution to her that 300 rupees a month for that solution was too much, but 10 rupees a day was not.
Yeah.
And that jolted him out of his sense of his identity, who he was, and forced him to put himself in the place of these customers, this point you were making. And he realized, that was a part of India he didn't fully appreciate. And now he had to really spend time with people like that and understand the world from their perspective. Then he discovered, they don't have access to banking, they can't do direct debit, all this kind of stuff. They live, earn, and spend on a daily basis. Cash economy. This is going back a few years.
Daily economy.
Daily economy. And based on that understanding, subsuming his identity, taking on their identity in a way, he then had to think about his business solution. And then his intention was to be like them in order to serve them. And only then did he have impact. So I think this idea of identity can be very powerful, can be a driver, but it can also be a trap. You can't be sort of a victim of who it was you were born as. You have to be able to transcend that at various points in order to have impact, in order to make change.
Thank you for that. So we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to just ask, let's move away from the topic completely. And is there some burning thing in your mind that you want to share with the audience today in this session? Anything that you may have learned while preparing, thinking for this particular session, that would be wonderful. So I'll start with Ranjay this time.
So maybe this is a self-serving answer, but it's because my head is in it right now. So I just wrote a book called How to Be Bold: The Science of Everyday Courage. And I've come to realize that if I think about the topics and themes we're talking about, to understand courage, you have to understand courage is taking action in the face of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action in the face of fear. Turns out fear is a hardwired, primal, primitive emotion that is hardwired in the primitive brain, that is activated by uncertainty. The world today is much more uncertain than it was 12, 24, 36 months ago. There's a lot more uncertainty in this world, which means there is a lot more fear in this world. And I think that means there is a lot more need for us to resource ourselves to take action in the face of fear and be bold in our actions. And I look at some of these examples we've used about people who build an identity, a narrative, they build intention. Those are ways to inoculate yourself to take on fear. You see this in all realms of life, sports to business to politics. And I think so in my mind, courage is the currency we are going to need to navigate the world that lies ahead of us.
No kidding. Thank you. Arun,
Yeah,
you want to go
thank
next?
you. You said think about, as we thought about the question, well, I had come here for two sessions. One was yesterday, reimagining India's economy, the road to a more equitable society, which I realized is the question we are discussing. Why is there not enough fairness in the way our economy is growing? And I realized, to your matter about being put back, we had come out, like I said, after independence, to be that we will show the world that we can do it with less resources, as well as you can. And I did that with my organization at Tata's, which is why I was invited to be a consultant to American organizations on the subject. Quite remarkable. But here in 1991, I'm saying, and I said it yesterday, what happened was we were convinced, made to be convinced that we weren't good enough yet. And so our way of building our self-reliance, we were told, stop it. You're wasting time and resources. Why don't you just take the ideas from other countries and other companies? Let them deliver things to your people. Take their money, you need it, and with their money will come their ideas and their control of your economy. Take it. The people will be very satisfied that they're going to get, smartphones they never had one, or better cars when they never had that. And so our Indian people got drugged with you know, comforts which were now more easily available. And we lost as a country that spirit that we have done it, we can do it, and we were being told, don't bother to do it. Let us do it for you. And so in the pharmaceutical industry, where we had built up and still have a generic producers which it doesn't respect the lengthening or IPs of innovate the process, and your IP is the process, right? The process. Way frugally, you can make the same molecule at much lower cost. Huh? That was our way. But we were told after 1990s when we joined WTO that no, 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 you got to honor IPR. And so Pfizer and others would prevent us from, after the life of the patent is over, selling the generics in the US or anywhere else. So we were again being made to our drugs are not good enough, we are not good enough. And after 1991, we went on adopting the WTO rules, following what the Americans said is good for us through the IMF. China did not. They said they still had this matter of we Chinese are as good as you. You have drugged us in the past and opened our markets. We are going to show you, and they have. Because they kept that spirit and that pride up. They're not allowing themselves to be bullied. And we have again come to the point where Donald Trump can bully us. And says, okay, so this is where we lost it. We lost it. So we're talking of economics and policy. I think our policies have discouraged innovation of this sort. Do it differently. We are encouraged to adopt other people's ideas and they bring it with their money. And the global capability centers that we are so excited about now, who owns them? The IPR produced in the global capability centers will be the property back of the same American and companies. And our Indians are going to be used once again as slog labor, working hard, long hours, but the fruits of that, the wealth out of it, the national asset out of it is not ours anymore.
Thank you. Jaideep,
Yeah.
closing.
So I'll just build on that. I think I'd like to leave you with this idea that I've learned through my own experience and research, which is that constraints and constraints in particular, rather than inhibiting innovation, can be a catalyst for creativity. And that's what I've
Very well.
learned. And I believe that this is India's superpower, our ability to do jugaad, to do more with less.
Less.
India is a world leader in frugal innovation. It can take these innovations elsewhere because even the most affluent countries face resource limitations.
Perfect. So with that, we would like to open up for Q&A. There is one hand, if there is a microphone.
The lady here.
Come here.
No. It will become alive.
Yeah,
I'm
we
an
can't give you our
optimist.
mic. We are right down.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
I thought I was being silenced.
Before you spoke.
Thank you, first of all, for a great presentation. Can I just ask you, as academics, business people, and innovators, what advice would you give to us as the professors in business schools who are teaching people? How do we achieve and how do we teach transformative thinking and encourage more altruism into our students?
Can I answer that? Well, I'll tell you why, and I'll explain to you. When I went to the United States, and I worked with a company called Arthur D. Little, it's a consulting company which is a founded by MIT and still owned as a trust by MIT. And it was about American universities' scientific ideas in the 19th century being made available to industry and helping industry to produce methods of making those products out of the new science available to the people. So that's the company that I joined as a consultant, Arthur D. Little Innovation in that company. And so it was, again, I'm saying university professors were part of our consulting operation, and the universities are teaching people. This was an offshoot, the consulting part, from which they would sort of get ideas maybe, uh, and into their teaching classes. So both in MIT and in Harvard, the two universities nearest to us, the professors would spend time with us, me and consultants here, to say, what is it that you feel is great about innovation in what you do? Because we are teaching a theory of innovation. So that is how I became popular with some of them, because I could talk about real life without having been taught management. I didn't go to business school without having been taught management. So it comes to, again, these reflections, the deep questions that we're saying, this is the source of innovation. And I want to just summarize it. One is, you must be wishing to do something which has not been done before. At least you don't know how it is done before. Whether it's for yourself or someone else, it's innovation. The second, as he said, is look around yourself and figure out what is the least costly way I can do it. Not the Silicon Valley way we find investors who keep throwing money at you. And those are not real innovations. And someone gets some money and lots of people lose.
Any of the professors want to
this
answer?
is the idea to be taught. And business schools are finding it hard to teach, for the point you made. Because all this time they've been known for teaching the other thing. Now, how can they admit that that was wrong?
Shall I go? I think you don't try and teach it, you have them experience it. And so we do a lot of that at Cambridge Judge Business School. We have our students act as consultants to startups, not just in the for-profit, but often in the sort of social sector as well. And they have to then, that puts them in touch with real consumers, often people who might be very different from them. And that process of trying to understand those customers forces them to, if not be altruistic, at least be empathetic, put themselves in the place of people who are very different from them, and then work out a solution. And that would be my suggestion. That's the way to do it.
Okay, second question right here in front.
Yeah, this question is to all the panelists. What is your idea for that India, for that area of product in services of the innovation?
Look, someone said it in my discussions yesterday. There are a lot of needs in our country, a lot of needs, unfulfilled needs people have. Good clothes, good shoes, basic things, good houses, basic needs. So we must find innovative ways to deliver education, health, shoes, clothes, which are required by Indian people, which is to CK Prahalad's thing, that the unmet needs of material things, manufactured things, maybe service things, but mostly material unmet manufactured things, is so huge in our country. It's such a huge market. The other people coming from outside with their technology will sell us their innovations, and they're very good. But are we figuring out more frugal ways to cater to this market? And that will be our competitive advantage, because that way of tapping the Indian market, they don't have. So our Indian entrepreneurs will scale up because they've got the biggest growing market of the world. India is, here on for the next 25 years, going to be the largest market in the world, provided our people have enough incomes to buy the stuff. So our innovation in business models has to be models which engage more people to produce and earn good wages so that they become the consumers of what we are producing or the enterprise is producing. So innovation in business model design.
So I'd like Ranjay to reflect, is it go-to-market or is it manufacturing? I think these are the two.
So, look, I think we're not talking about the elephant in the room here. Artificial intelligence is going to have dramatic impact on the way we produce and the way we consume. And I think is that, we are at a major global inflection point in the way industry will operate, in how they will produce and be consumed. And I think India, in some ways, is uniquely positioned to be part of that story or not be part of that story. And I was just talking, I'm writing a case on a company in Mumbai that is trying to build the next generation e-commerce agent. How many Indian companies are doing that? They're going to have to spend $1 billion to do that. But they say our competition is going to be Amazon. That's who we're trying to build against. So I think trying to understand how we leverage, which will be a sea change in the world around us, both to serve the domestic market, because it creates the opportunity for changing the economics of production. It also changes the way we get distributed and consumed. So I think, we have to really be asking ourselves, are we really positioned to play in this new changing landscape? And I think very few Indian companies are positioned to play in both the infrastructure side of AI and on the application of AI. To me,
Well,
that's a shock.
that is a total different beast. Nobody knows which way it is going to go, whether it's US or India for that matter. But I'm glad you brought up the question of AI. So, okay, let's ask right here. This might be the last question. We are running out of time.
So I'm delighted that name of CK Prahalad has come several times. So CK was somebody that we have worked with. He did write this book, Bottom of the Pyramid. The two great examples, right in Jaipur, Jaipur Food, one of the best innovator. Another one, Jaipur Rugs. Both of them are unique. The question that I'm asking is, in this new world where there are two things going on at the same time, there's tremendous amount of uncertainty. All of us know uncertainty. In this one, how does one have courage to use these ideas?
Just one thing, because we've got no time. When there's uncertainty around you and you can't rely on things around you, you have to do it yourself with what is
Yes.
around you. And Rajasthan, the rugs, is a great example. Is using all local people, local women, looking after the children of local women, so that the women, when they come to work, they're not worried about their children. It's a whole social innovation. It's not just marketing a rug in America. It's much more. It's the whole innovation in the form of the enterprise and who is cared for, including the workers, the women, and their children. That's a great example. That's the way to be self-reliant.
I'll just pick up on one thing over here. You said you used the word uncertainty. So I just want to pick up on that. Uncertainty is not the same as risk, by the way. Risk is where you know the distribution of outcomes. You can do some rough mapping of probabilities on the distribution of outcomes. Very famous economist Frank Knight said uncertainty he described as unknown unknown. You don't even know possibility. You don't know what is going to happen. And I think that's what we are in today. Whether you're involved in frugal innovation, whether you're involved in technology innovation, whether we're in a very dramatically changing world where tariffs are going to change, geopolitics are going to change, innovators, entrepreneurs will have to learn to grapple with uncertainty of a very different form. And how do we resource ourselves to take action in the face of uncertainty? I mean, I'll just say, Winston Churchill famously said, fear is a reaction, courage is a decision.
Let's
And I
end
think
on that.